Welcome to the Quantum Healthy Podcast. I'm Andeea, a licensed addiction counselor, and along with my co-host, Laura Kissmann, a quantum nutritionist, we will be inviting expert scientists, clinicians, survivors, and thrivers to distill their pearls of wisdom attained from applying quantum biology to their fields of research and everyday lives. Our goal is to bring you easy to understand principles and practices about the study of light, water, and magnetism so you can take your health into your own hands. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Quantum Healthy Podcast. We have a very special guest today, Mahwish Syed, and she is an award-winning fashion and interior designer. We're so excited to have her on today sharing her amazing story. And I would also add quantum interior designer to that because she is also certified in applied quantum biology. She has a best-selling book titled Purgatory to Paradise: How Cancer Helped Me Design an Authentic Life. So obviously, cancer survivor, which is the story she will be sharing with us today. She's also a proud mother, and she has dressed the bodies and houses of for more than 2 decades. And she designs very beautiful environments. If you follow her on Instagram, you can see a little bit and go on her website too and see a little bit of what she has created. Just beautiful. And she's been featured in New York Times, Architectural Digest, Elle Decor, and Hampton's Cottages and Gardens. And we're going to be having her back on the podcast to talk about all about interior design. But today we wanted to introduce her because she is in recovery and has healed herself using quantum practices, has an amazing story to share. So I'm going to let you start, Mahwish, and just, we all met at the QBC, the Institute of Applied Quantum Biology, through the Quantum Biology Collective. And why don't you just tell the audience anything I might have missed, and then we'll just start your story from there.
Oh my gosh, Andeea and Laura, so glad to be with you both, gorgeous ladies. I think you did a fabulous introduction. There's a lot to talk about, but number one, I want to mention, and this is the theme that runs in all my creations, whether they're interiors, whether it's jewelry or fashion. I celebrate the divinity in all of us. I celebrate the divine goddesses that we are. And it's something that was the backbone of my book and my writing and all my designs for, I would say, millennia, because we're ancient beings, right? To be able to talk about quantum in that way.
Mm-hmm.
And so I would add that as just one little thread in our warp to weave into our weft.
Amazing. Yes, you have amazing textile history too. And you and I have a lot of love for the textile industry, and we have that in common, which we shared a little bit about yesterday on our Instagram live. So if anybody's listening, definitely go scroll back to find that. And yeah, why don't we start with, we start your story where you see fit, maybe a little bit before your diagnosis, if that's appropriate, or when you got this diagnosis.
Sure. Well, as everyone thinks, I ate well, I exercised, I didn't smoke. So going to a routine mammogram, I was completely gobsmacked, totally surprised. And I read the technician's face more than I knew at that moment, like specifically what was going on. And I think whenever anyone gets any kind of diagnosis, especially with cancer, you are drawn into a trauma state. And on an emotional level, it's really hard to settle. And at that moment, I realized that I had been kidnapped by Hades and taken into my underworld. And life as I knew it was no more. And what I considered that turning point was that moment when I realized there could possibly be something, quote unquote, wrong. And I do want to state, this is really important, framework and mindset is your foundation. And instead of looking at myself as a victim of cancer or a victim of my diagnosis, the drama triangle that society has for us these days is the doctor is, the hero riding on the white steed, and the patient is the villain, is the victim who is, the object of this cancer, which is the villain, right? And I don't ascribe to that paradigm whatsoever. And as a matter of fact, what I do believe is that we have agency and we have the ability to frame this for ourselves, and we can be our own heroes and we can co-create by educating ourselves. And this is where the quantum biology came in, because I started investigating Andeea. I started investigating from a material standpoint. I started auditing all the materials in my home because, as we may or may not know, most cancers, over 2/3 of cancers, are epigenetic, which means they are not genetic. They are the result of your lifestyle and environment. And say, if I thought I was having a fairly healthy lifestyle, what could have caused this, right? So
Mhm.
then I started really becoming curious and looking around, first of all, my environment, look at my home on a physical level, and auditing all the materials I was using, auditing all the foods I was imbibing and the air that I was inhaling, all of those things, in addition to relationships, in addition to the people that were around me, right? And how much our emotions affect our biology as well. So, in that way, I became a sleuth.
Oh my gosh. You touched on the fact that you didn't say it this way, but I say all the time with people who are recovering from addiction, it is a rebirth of ourselves, and we get to rewrite our story. And, you not taking on that victim mentality, that was huge because that is a very low vibrating emotion. And so I don't know if you were even privy to those things, like our emotions, the higher vibrating is really important. And it's so hard because you are going through, you got just pushed into that traumatic situation when, you're just expecting a routine exam that day because you're leading a healthy lifestyle. So why would you get a negative diagnosis?
Well, when I started really investigating, I realized my lifestyle wasn't that healthy,
Oh,
and
okay.
to become coming to terms with facing our shadow side, which I talk a lot in my book quite a bit. And I think in order to make peace with our demons, with our shadow side, that is really truly the way to health, true health. Mentally, emotionally, spiritually, physically, all of those things are intertwined. As a
Hmm.
matter of fact, I don't even believe in a mind body construct. I think it's too binary and simplified. I think our bodies are our emotions in physical form, just like water can be liquid crystal and gas and ice, right? Solid. So in that way, our bodies are much more fluid and are constantly in a state of movement, of flux. And so I believe that my cancer was actually my doorway to freedom, Andeea.
Oh, I love that. I feel like my all my stuff and how I'm relating to your story is just, with what I've experienced. Because I just want to say I'm not comparing addiction to cancer, but in that way, I definitely, death comes to our door, or as you say, Hades comes knocking, and it allows us to grow and to actually look at what it is, what brought me here, and learn from it and grow from it and come out with so much strength and freedom. And with the emotion piece, so like with emotion code therapy, I don't know if you're familiar with emotion code, but the balls of energy that get trapped in our emotions that can get lodged in certain places in our body. And with emotion code therapy, those can be lifted up. So what you just said aligns perfectly with that. And it makes sense to me because I know that that worked. And many of us are walking around with at least like 1,500. They say it's an average of like 1,500 trapped emotions just based on our life experience up until this point. And yeah, I can only those things do. We know that those things do lead to disease in the body. So, do you want to point out any, like, so you just mentioned, oh, well, my life, or my my life wasn't as healthy as I thought. Do you want to point anything out that might be helpful for listeners, like things that might have surprised you, like, oh, I thought this was actually healthy, but it was really not.
Yeah, it's super simple. I had the best Teflon, gorgeous, expensive pots I was using for 20 plus years. And all of a sudden I'm like, what the hell? Like, I've been using this. They're beautiful. They were very high end. They were on my wedding registry. I had to throw everything out. That's one kind of pragmatic thing. I threw out every plastic black utensil you could possibly find. I have like audit lists for this, like in terms of like kitchen and living room and so on and so
That's
forth.
amazing.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. I'm like, and I also do easy swaps and I do all this research because now I'm like completely invested in investigating really what a healthy life looks like. And I think that's why you and I connect, because also on a quantum level, and we talked about a little bit of this yesterday, is that sunlight, that connection to nature is our foundation for all other things, all other modalities. And it creates that domino cascade where if you don't have that first foundational piece, all the other modalities are not as effective. So you can eat all the great foods that you want, but if you're not getting that primary foundation of sunlight and the circadian balance of your life, you're fucked. I'm sorry, but like you're screwed. We can edit that out.
You're good.
Our
So,
audience is mostly adults. I think you're.
so I just think that's important. The other thing I audited, and I was in a very toxic, parasitic relationship with someone who was torturing me during my cancer treatment. And actually, I finally was able to come out of it throughout. Cancer actually made me strong enough to be able to deal with that. Instead of going into myself, I became more me. I was able to really, what I call decant. Decantation is the ability on an alchemical level to be able to take away all the stuff that doesn't matter and to really purify my values and what I wanted my life to be like, and to be courageous in my choices. And ironically, I was not as much as fearful of death as I was afraid of losing love. And so that was a theme that I write about in my book. This idea that sometimes we are literally, for me, death was a kind messenger. Hades was a very kind messenger that brought me from a life where I was dying a death by 1,000 cuts with this person, and then finally able to give myself the space and focus on my own health for the first time instead of serving others first. And I talk about this in terms of being a Wonder Woman, which is, I don't want to be Wonder Woman. I don't want to be superhuman. I'm sick and tired of this rhetoric of like wanting to be that everything woman, because I'm both Eastern and Western. I have a very strong Eastern work ethic and a Western work ethic. And it's like a double whammy for extreme exhaustion and burnout. So I think it's really important to recognize that, you know, something like cancer, it can take root in someone with me who didn't even have a genetic, I had all my genetic testings done and it was not genetic. So it was totally from lifestyle, environment, toxicity in terms of emotional toxicity, being in a trauma state on a constant cycle with this person. So things are not as simple as they seem, and it's not so black and white. And I think it's really important to recognize and to own that stuff in yourself, what you allow. And sometimes what we allow as women is to give too much of ourselves until we're drained. And that does create a disastrous health recipe.
Oh my gosh. Wow. Okay, so you're kind of talking a little bit about some of the things that were in your environment that were making you sick. Can you share, just because I want people to understand how far you've come, because you've shared with me privately about some of the things, and what you've been through is just, and the pain that this brought on, and you came out through it, and I really want to highlight. So could you just talk about like what was a typical day when you had cancer? What did you have to go through? What were the symptoms that you were going through on a daily basis, and maybe how long that lasted for you?
Oh my gosh, where to begin? So the process is, was a year long. I went through a very intense allopathic protocol. I'm a single mom. My son was 9 at the time. I'm an entrepreneur. I have my own business. So during that time, I didn't tell my clients. I didn't tell anyone. I kept it a secret. I was not someone who, I was very private. So ironically, I ended up publishing this book and telling my story, which is a complete therapy for me as someone who hides and makes sure like I appear to be having everything in control. And I think, going through surgery, going through chemo, going through radiation, going through the drugs and having cording, having complications from the surgery and everything you can possibly imagine, burns, scars. I couldn't lift my arms. It was one of those things where I realized every single thing that happened was a lesson in me focusing on me. I had to focus on me for the first time, like truly focus on my body and how to get it back. And by the way, and this is really important for people to know, and this, I'm very passionate about this. While I was in that cancer treatment, I never stopped feeling worthy of that care. Because a lot of times we don't feel like we're worthy of giving ourselves that care. Even though I was in a relationship where I finally had to push back and take care of me, and that was very hard, I had a lot of resistance. That said, I am a maker of beauty. I've been dealing with beauty my whole entire life. And what I want to emphasize here, when I am talking about beauty, I don't mean like cosmetics industry surface level stuff. What I'm talking about is divine cellular alignment on a very spiritual level. When you feel beautiful, we all have that homeostasis within ourselves. Our body seeks that homeostasis. And that to me, that harmony of our cells, of our vibration, our frequency, that to me is beauty in physical form. Okay. And so in that way, even though I may have been puffy and my hair was falling out, I had no eyebrows, I had scars, I was invested in feeling as beautiful as I could. And it sounds counterintuitive because most women feel like they can't feel beautiful until they heal. For me, I felt beautiful in order to heal. Beauty as a healing modality is something that I practiced, and the way I did it was actually through design. I was able to create rituals of reverence for myself. And I'll give you guys a really simple example. And this one anyone can relate to. When you and I were talking about birthing ourselves, well, when I was going through chemo, I felt like I was literally had morning sickness. Like I couldn't eat the same things. The smells were whack. My mom came over. She was making my favorite Pakistani spicy chicken and rice dishes, and I could not eat them. It was such a tragedy. So whatever it was I could eat, like say, for example, a sliced banana, yeah, I took down my best wedding china, my wedding silverware that I never used while I was married. I started using this stuff post-divorce. I brought all this stuff out. I garnished my banana with violas from my garden. I spread rose petals on my table. I lit candles. I used my best napkins, my cloth napkins, and I created this beautiful ritual of reverence to celebrate what I could imbibe, right? And to create this beautiful atmosphere as a designer, as a goddess, to be able to give myself that moment of serenity and be grateful that I was able to nourish my cells, even if it was as simple as a slice of banana.
Oh my gosh, this reminds me of, I don't do this anymore, but I used to buy, a nice thing for myself. Maybe it was a dress, maybe it was, you know, dishes, whatever it was. And it would sit because that was being saved for a special occasion. It's like, why do we not live in the present? And every single day is a special occasion where we want to feel beauty and in alignment, especially cellularly. I absolutely love everything that you're saying right now, and it makes complete sense. Like the piece that you said is most people wait till they get better to, feel beautiful, but you were doing it and felt a need and intuitively knew you had to do it now. That's kind of like also in, manifestation where if we want to manifest something and we want to become a certain person. So let's say we are sick and we want to
Yeah.
manifest ourselves as well. We got to live as that end result person. We got to live like them now. We have to
Yeah.
identify as that healed person now. We cannot be in that sick frame of mind, which speaks to the mindset piece too. We can't be letting that old story roll, because we need to be in that vibration of what we know is coming and what we know is true and what we know we want, what we know we deserve, what we know is beautiful, what we know is our innate birthright. Oh,
Yes.
I just love what you're sharing.
And by the way, I didn't bring my book. It's on the other table over there. But I want to show you Purgatory to Paradise. Why did I name my book Purgatory to Paradise?
Yeah.
Because exactly what you're saying, to not wait in the purgatory of living a life by default, and to not, hold, letting those dishes gather dust on that cabinet, just to be able to use that beauty today. People give you gifts and then you're like, oh, I'll light this candle when it's a special occasion. I'm like, I'm lighting that damn candle today. Like,
Yeah.
what are we waiting for? And I think cancer like kicked my butt because it made me realize, oh my gosh. And it's a tendency, it's a conditioning of like saving it for a special occasion. Well, guess what? I didn't know what tomorrow was going to bring. And I was like, why not pull the trigger now on the things that I really want? I ended up redecorating my apartment during cancer treatment, because it was the first time I was actually like stopping and looking around going, oh my God, that story of the cobbler's kids, they don't have any shoes on. It's like me with the design. I make other people's houses look beautiful. And my own house was a hodgepodge. So I'm like, oh my God, I got to change this. I got to change that. And I actually started redecorating while I was in treatment. And that was like the bone I was chewing on and that kept me going. Beauty kept me going. And I think what you were talking about is basically quantum jumping. It's quantum jumping into that reality and creating that reality right here, right now. Paradise is in you at all times. Paradise is not somewhere you go to. It's what you are. And as long as we all realize that we are living paradise and we can create that harmony and we can create that beautiful alignment on a cellular level by doing these practices, that's how you achieve beauty. That is true beauty. And that's something that I've made my life's mission to teach and to embody and to continue spreading in the world.
That is so, when you're in your house I'm sure that when you were redecorating your house rather, I'm sure that brought you also like this sense of purpose, right? That like, you were really creating also an environment for you to heal, like how you were speaking even before this. Oh, I love all of that. So,
Andeea,
yeah,
yeah,
good.
and Mahwish, I just want to add so much to that, but Andy and I, we've just had 2 episodes with 2 water experts. And, this comes up as a common theme when we talk, even offline, about how, your thoughts, of course, can change your water. But it just makes me think that you did everything to make your water perfectly structured, and negatively charged. And then how much, that's a potent healing force in your body. So I just commend you for that.
Well,
Yeah, in every way.
thank you so much. I mean, I played 90s EDM in my radiation room. I was playing 90. Oh yeah. And the kids who were my technicians, they're like, what's this? And I'm like, you don't know or what I was listening to. It was wild. And by the way, I did these now, and I have these meditations in my course. So while I was even in chemo or radiation, I would imagine myself as the divine goddess instead of having an infusion of poison. By the way, Taxol, Taxotere is derived from the Pacific yew tree. So I did the research on that, and I realized that it was venerated by the Druids and the Greeks as the tree of immortality. So instead of imagining myself dying, I was imagining being imbued by this divine immortal light and having me become like that immortal yew tree, which, by the way, in reality lives to be thousands of years old and looks super gnarly on the outside, but is super alive. And that's how I felt. I was looking super gnarly on the outside. If you look at pictures of me when I was being interviewed by Architectural Digest, I was working on a show house. Guys, my phone, you know, your iPhone does the facial recognition. It sees me as like two different people because it doesn't even recognize me now the way I looked back then. I was puffy from the steroids, the bone pain, and my hair was totally like not really there, even though I did the cold cap. But I looked from the outside, it's totally different. As a matter of fact, I had an uncle from Pakistan saw a picture of me online and they're like, who's that? I'm like, are you kidding me? Like he didn't even recognize me. And I think a lot of women suffer from this pressure of looks and appearing to be beautiful. And I knew I was beautiful. I knew that that beauty happened on such an immortal, ancient level, and that maybe the world may not see me the way I saw me. I know for a fact who I am now was already in place then. And that's really important to stress because now, in terms of all the modalities that I've researched, including quantum, I am looking this way on the outside because I was that way on the inside.
That's literally living proof of the soapbox that I just went on about manifestation. It is true. You when you were looking in the mirror, even though you were puffy and your hair was not, ideal, you were seeing the person that like me and Laura are seeing right now. You're seeing the beautiful woman that you know that you are from the inside and out. Like we see you on the outside, but I know your light show on the inside is amazing as well and
Oh,
shining because it's
thank
touching so many people, including myself, which is how we ended up being quantumly entangled.
Yes, yes. And I honestly, it's so interesting because when I was designing clothes, I had a shop in the East Village, and there was an article written about how I'm dressing the goddess, and I would create custom clothing for every woman and her curves at that time. Everything was, clothing was made around you instead of the other way around and trying to fit into a size. And I was already meditating on the goddess in each and every single one of us, and that was a huge value of mine. And so this idea of superficial beauty, it's like not in fashion to even say the word beauty because people associate so many other things with it. I think right now, the more I speak about it and the more we all discuss the spiritual aspect of beauty, the better we get grounded in to the quantum wisdom that we're practicing, because that to me is divine beauty in practical form.
Oh, that's amazing. This is a great segue into my question of how did you find quantum biology? And you just mentioned other modalities. What are some other things that you learned from that were able to aid in your healing?
Oh my gosh, I did hypnotherapy during chemo to help with the bone pain and the extreme fatigue. I was working throughout, and it was something that I didn't even tell when I was working on the show house. It was I want to say 1828 Sea Captain's Mansion in Brooklyn Heights. And I remember walking up the stairs one step at a time because I was in agony. And some of the other designers, they're like, "Are you okay? Like, what's wrong?" And I'm like, "It's okay. I just had chemo yesterday for 12 hours." And they were like, "What?" And I said, I'm sorry. It's just I didn't want to appear, this whole thing of like, I'm not doing it all, I'm not being it all, I'm not perfect. That's why I wrote Designing an Authentic Life, because cancer really kicked my butt into authenticity in a massive way. So to be able to honor that truth of who you are, and that you're not, that you need help sometimes, that you need a little bit of assistance. So it's important to note that. So hypnotherapy was one of them. And quantum, I was already dabbling and reading about it.
Mhm.
And I think I found it on Insta, to be honest. And something told me and again, I write about this in my book. Cancer helped me to really start listening to my inner GPS, that quiet whisper inside all of us that we are taught to ignore. And I started listening, and like whatever little whispers that were saying, follow this, do this, look at this, read this. And I started doing the research because I was already invested in figuring out kind of the epigenetic factors of cancer. So when I read a study about breast cancer and blue light, and how blue light is affecting us in a massive way, and it's associated with cancer. So I was really interested in looking at light from a cancer perspective. So I started really just looking at the quantum side, and one thing led to another, and I'm like, damn, this is big and not many people know. And then as an interior designer, how can I use all of this knowledge to literally create an environment and a lifestyle that honors our ancient roots? Because guys, I grew up in Pakistan. I grew up with ancient architecture that is aligned with our circadian biology, and here's how. So Islamic architecture, whether you go to Spain or Morocco, India, Pakistan, has a central courtyard. And the central courtyard has always light and a water feature and a garden feature, the biophilic side. And the rooms are always facing in, and they're on the periphery. It actually helps cool the space down as well. And so I grew up basically living outdoors and eating outdoors. We would have our meals outside, especially in the summertime. We didn't have air conditioning. We would sleep on the roof underneath the stars. So I had a very strong foundation of a naturally circadian ancient lifestyle that I didn't even realize was something that I was going to end up designing here as an adult, which is super awesome. It's like full circle. So I think that part really intrigues me, to be able to connect our old ways with our modern technology and create a real balance. And it's not throwing the baby out with the bathwater on either side, because again, I find that kind of binary polarity a bit, it's kind of dumb, truth be told. I find it's too oversimple. So to be able to combine ways and to teach and create and design spaces that are in alignment with our circadian ancient roots, that's my jam.
Oh, I can't wait for the next episode when we dive deep into that. But one of the things, okay, so one of the things you had just said is, asking for help when you were on the stairs and you couldn't walk up the stairs. And that is so common with the disease of addiction. We talk about it all the time. Nobody wants to ask for help because of the stigma, and you're feeling that with and I'm sure that there's other diseases that people don't
Yeah.
want to ask for help because
Yeah.
like I know whenever in my past, if I was to get a diagnosis or injure myself or anything, and Laura, you can probably relate to this right now, and I was sharing this with her earlier, I would feel immense shame, like I did something wrong, like, oh, I wasn't doing the things. So now everybody's going to look at me like, oh, that's why she's sick, because she wasn't doing the things. Well, she should have been doing what she was told, blah, blah, blah. Like I would have this narrative going through my head of the judgment I would get from other people. Now I don't look at I look at the good in others. I don't assume that they're judging me. So that for one has helped, but being able to ask for help is huge, because that actually you are entering in a space of courage, and courage is actually the emotion that is the neutral, the baseline. It's a vibration of 200. We want to be there or higher.
I love that. And yes, the stigma of cancer was like the scarlet letter for me. And I want to add one more thing. This is really huge. My maternal aunt had the same diagnosis and had passed the summer prior to my own. And she waited far too long in complete silence. Also, that body part is, no one wants to talk about it. There's a stigma around that, especially in the Eastern cultures. And I realized for the first time, and it's very humbling, is I had to ask for help. I had to just sound the alarm and say, I need to fix this and I need to do this and I need to act fast. In my mind, I wasn't even thinking about myself. I was thinking about my son. And I thought there's no path. I mean, I'm not waiting. I mean, I'll do whatever it takes to be there for him. But the stigma is huge and it's very humbling. It's an act of extreme vulnerability to be able to ask for help, because I'm much more comfortable giving help. That's how I always identified myself to be, as the one who is always giving help. Receiving help and learning how to receive, that's a feminine. It's so ironic. I was in my masculine this whole time, and that's part of the problem. I think to be able to be in our feminine, to be that goddess, we have to learn how to receive. We have to learn to say, you know, I can't do this by myself. And what's interesting is Western world, you know, I'm away from, my family lives 1,000 miles away, even here in the States, and then my extended family's across the globe. I grew up in a culture where I had 4 generations under one roof, and I had my aunties and, you know, my a whole extended family and great grandma and grandmas. And it literally was a village that raised me when I was little. And now living in this atomized space of, you know, be going away to college and going away from your family and creating this, your own little microcosm, we're so isolated. And I think this idea of community, whether it's online, whether it's in person, that is an ancient modality. That is something that we have expressed. We have passed the wisdom down from, you know, the crone to the mother to the maiden, for millennia. And I think we need to honor that again, and to be able to say, hey, whether that's an online cancer group, or, you know, I do so much work now, workshops with cancer survivors. So I feel like in my own way, I'm passing down that wisdom to those who need it.
That's so good. That's so, so good. I absolutely relate so much to everything that you just said, even though I'm, you know, that in addiction, that's the, like I call it that's the super coping skill. That is the main coping skill that we have is community.
Yeah.
Like, you know, I didn't get treatment and I didn't have community for, I just didn't know. So it was 7 years before I understood that there was people like me that I could go to. And yeah, and I, you know, just you sharing about your culture and how you were raised. I, you know, I grew up here in the States, but I was always at grandma and grandpa's house, whether it was my paternal grandparents or my maternal grandparents. And it was like, I can't think about growing up any other way, like without having my extended family. And my mom, you know, she's the third of 8 and my dad was the third of 5. So I had tons of aunts, tons of cousins, like there was so much family. Now we didn't all live under the same roof. That for a short time, my grandma had lived with us, but that is so cool that you had 4 generations of people. And then also the explanation of how you were circadian and outside with that courtyard in the middle. And I did not know that about the cooling and how that helps with that. And of course, you know, Mother Nature makes no mistakes. And in the ancient times and in antiquity, like they knew what was going on because they had to be more in tune. They didn't have an electric grid to just suit all their needs, right? They had to make that with using nature's rules.
Yeah, yeah, and it's so efficient. It's so efficient. And it, you know, I always use this analogy of, you know, if you look at our human existence on this planet as a 24-hour clock, we've only had electricity in the last 30 seconds of our lives, of our existence here. And for the rest of those 23 plus hours, we've been in tune with the sun. That's why we are so rooted. That's why I think quantum biology and the quantum philosophy of living is ancient, because we've been practicing that exact thing for thousands of years. So it's, for me, going back to basics.
Yeah.
Mahwish, I had the privilege I was in the Air Force for my first career. And in my last 2 years, I worked in foreign liaison. And I actually had the privilege to have probably 20 Pakistani officers come, and I was literally, I didn't live with them, but I was with them 18 hours a day, taking them to dinners and speak, different places they had to meet different military dignitaries here in Canada. And I learned a lot about their culture. We actually took a trip. We went to Toronto as well. So I really, like I say, I really got to know them. And it was really brought to me how different the culture was. And it almost brought a little bit of shame to where we are now, in modern Canadian life. And like, not shame, but they really made me question, how this is actually isn't normal the way we live, and how beautiful their family, these four generations in a home. And they were just, I remember one particular guy, his wife had just had a baby, and he just could not wait to go home. He just couldn't wait to, and I don't know, I just thought one day I'm going to get to Pakistan. I really want to,
Oh my
go
God.
back.
Thank you for sharing. And by the way, there's a very ancient tradition when a woman has a baby, she goes to her mom's house, and for 7 weeks, she sleeps. All the women take care of her. She gets massages. And the only time she needs to do anything is when she's feeding the baby. Otherwise, she's taken care of and the baby's taken care of. She doesn't have to do anything. And this is the best part, the guy, her husband, has to bribe her back to be able to come back home to him. So he offers her gifts and gifts and gifts until she wants to come home. So it's very much maternally centered. Of course, I never had that ritual for myself because I married a Brit. But anyway, that's a whole other different podcast. So I love that. And I'm just curious, like, what is there a certain example that you felt like was a real kind of contrast to?
The biggest thing was just the sense of family. That we just have this nuclear family here, and yet they live with so many generations. And he just sat me down, and I don't know, it was at a meal, and it just, I'll never forget the conversation of just this impression of, we have just morphed and changed so much in North America, and the Western, lifestyle. And on myself, I have two children, and the second child, he was 3 months old, and my husband got deployed to fly over Bosnia, and I ended up spending 7 weeks alone before my mother-in-law came for the last two. And I'll never, like, it was so challenging, and I didn't have any. I was on 10 acres, two dogs, two horses I was taking care of, and the two kids, and a 2-year-old. And you know what? I'm not Wonder Woman, but I couldn't take the time and realize I needed help, and I needed to ask for help. And I got sick. Something happened in that journey, and I had a health challenge, and then there was resentment for that, of how did I get into this position? And yet I come from a very patriotic military family. I totally understand my husband had to go and serve, and I understand all of that, but it was just, how could you leave me alone with this huge challenge, And it was, yeah, anyway. But so to contrast that to, it's just incredible. I love to hear that hopefully that wisdom from Pakistan, we will spread this message with this podcast, and hopefully with your book too.
Thank you. Thank you. And thank you for sharing that. I mean, it's so telling because I feel the same way. I feel a frustration because I have these memories of, having all my aunties. I write about it in my book, like stories from my childhood that I weave into
Mm.
lessons as cancer was like really kicking my butt. And I realized like all these things that I just naturally took for granted were things that I really was yearning for again. And that were so important. And what does that world look like for us now? And how can we be the wise women for one another now? I mean, this podcast is our virtual fireside chat, and it'll live on in perpetuity. But like, being in person and having someone help you and letting you sleep while they take care of the dishes, even something so simple as that, is so important, and I think we need to get back to it.
Andeea, sorry, I've lost you. I can't see you here a second. She knows the background. I don't know if she told you, but I yesterday had a trauma off my bike, and I've broken my tibia. So if you see me shifting around, I'm uncomfortable, and I've got ice and whatever. But both of you have given me gems to take forward from today. Thank you
Oh,
so much of just getting out of my victimhood, and really, yeah, move forward, and a lot of doing a lot of visual work as
Oh my
well.
gosh, Laura, you have such a pretty smile. I would never have known.
Yeah, a little more. I had morphine last night and ibuprofen. I'm doing some of the Western medicine combined with some homeopathy as well. And yeah, Andeea gave me some gems even before we got on of things to visualize. And I'm very grateful to both of you right now. I feel like you're speaking to me. So thank you.
Oh, Laura, I'm so happy that you're here with us. Because yeah, I don't know if I would be able to do it the day after the accident. So we're very happy to have you. Now I know, Laura, you wanted to ask about
Yeah,
diet and
yeah,
nutrition. So I think this is a perfect time for that.
yeah. I had a couple questions. One, I'll just jump before that, and it ties into diet, was when you got your genetic testing, did you ever do any mitochondrial genetic testing? Because that's something in the quantum space that not everybody does, but I just wondered, did you ever do that in your journey?
I don't remember doing that per se. Whatever was like the panel, they did the normal
Okay.
panel. So I don't know if it was a
Yeah.
mitochondrial one in addition to it.
Because
All
I was thinking like where my question comes from was, did you align any, like, if you were to find out you had a mitochondria that belongs, I'm pretty sure we know your mitochondria is from Pakistan and is, you know, on the maternal side, like, is your haplotype one that is challenged living where you may live? I don't know where you live today.
New York City, New York City. So a different
New York,
latitude than where I grew
right,
up. Very
right,
different latitude. I'm not sure. I'm not sure. But one thing I want to stress is, and this is the quantum side, is I ended up just naturally, before I even really started digging into it, I was always sunning myself. I was always outside. I had a
right.
gravity chair on my terrace, and when I was even recuperating from surgery, I would just nap in the sun. That's what I wanted to do,
Yeah, yeah,
is I was just napping in the sun on my chair. And I wanted to be outside at all times, just like, I don't know why, that was just like something I was craving. But
yeah. But
I,
that's intuition, right?
yeah,
That's, your mitochondria were actually begging for that. And, and maybe that may have been part and parcel why you know, got the diagnosis. Who knows if you were lacking that, if you had a sunlight deficiency, right? Knowing
right.
your mitochondrial haplotype. Yeah.
That's true.
Interesting.
It very well could have, because I definitely know in terms of diet, again, we all think we're eating really, really well, but
Hmm.
lately, I mean, since my cancer treatment, I have really tightened the belt. I only eat from the people whose first names I know. Whether, I know my farmers, I know what the chickens are eating, I know what the eggs are coming from, I know where the milk is coming from, I
Love
know,
that.
like, I know as much as I can all the vegetables. Either I grow them myself or I buy them from someone whose first name I do know. So it's very, I've become laser focused about nutrition, but in a very intuitive way. And again, I was already practicing seasonal food with a light signature of this latitude versus, say, something that's trucked in from Mexico. I already was practicing that because I grew up with it. I grew up with only eating seasonally back home.
Mhm.
So, bitter melon was, oh my God, bitter melon. Grela, which and it's really good for you, but like when that was in season, we'd have like bitter melon with goat, bitter melon with this, bitter melon was always like the same stuff. So I'm used to just having whatever's seasonal. So it was something that I was practicing and I started really honing in on. So that's one thing. And in terms of cutting things out, I mean, I don't eat junk food. I try not to eat anything that I started looking at the preservatives of everything. I'm cutting everything out. That way I started baking my own bread. I mean, you name it, I did it because I finished treatment right as the pandemic hit. I literally got so lucky because my active hospital treatment ended, I would say, within weeks of the pandemic when New York was shut. So
Wow.
there were those people who had to go through chemo and all of that later, which I don't know how they managed, where, my mom wasn't able to fly in anymore to be able to come with me to my chemo. So
Mhm.
I got very lucky that way. So during the pandemic, everyone was big. So I started, making all my naan from scratch and using organic and everything like that. So yeah, I hope that answers some of it. If you have any other questions, let me know.
Yeah. No, I wondered if have you gone through the rabbit hole of deuterium and, keeping deuterium low for your cancer, or any of that?
That I would love to talk to you more about. I have some questions. We can talk about it after.
Yeah, that'd be great. Okay.
Oh, this has been so wonderful. And I'm just going to say it now because, yeah, I think I'm going to put this on. This has to go on the Quantum Recovery podcast because this was this is such an inspirational story. Like that is the kind of stuff I share on my other podcast is people recovering and using quantum practices. And this is just so inspiring. And I cannot wait to have you on because I want to talk to you about all the things home because I myself have been on a transformation journey with things in the home. I want to ask you about quartz glass and all that stuff. So we're so excited to have you back, but I want to ask you our signature question here on the Quantum Healthy podcast. We always ask, what does quantum healthy mean to you?
Quantum healthy means honoring my ancient roots. That's what it means. It's to get back to where we were and have been for thousands of years, and to not just talk about it as a concept, but to live it every day.
Oh my gosh, I love it. Love it. That's a quotable right there, Laura.
You betcha. I wrote it down.
I knew you wrote it
I
down.
got it.
Okay, everyone, thank you so much for listening. And Mahwish, thank you so much for coming onto the podcast and also coming back so soon. In a couple weeks, we'll be recording another podcast, so part 2 of this. And yeah.
And Andeea, can I do a little thank you?
Yes, of course.
Okay, I was just having a little fun during this, and this is what I captured, okay? God, now I just lost it as I said this here, hang on, because I can't see it, hang on. Okay, I wanted to thank you for inspiring others with your story and for celebrating the divinity in all of us and for releasing yourself from the kind messenger you called Hades, which most of us probably wouldn't, and letting go of the trauma cycle and not subscribing to the current paradigm, looking to your environment, which is so much, quantum biology, for the answers with the sleuth of the likes of Sherlock Holmes. That's what I came up with. And to decant all that was unnecessary, using your words, and teaching us that we have to be a beautiful receiving goddess in order to heal and infuse serenity and quantum wisdom in that. And that the final message that you brought, speaking about Pakistan is just how we need to embrace community. Thank you so much for everything.
Oh my gosh, my pleasure. You guys are going to make me cry.
Laura, that was such a beautiful, encapsulates the whole episode so beautifully.
This episode is so beautiful, Mahwish. I can't wait to come back and hear, when you officially come back. Did we ask about your offerings? Did we?
Oh yeah, please share. We'll have everything in the show notes, of course, but yeah, share what you have.
Yeah, I have wonderful audit lists. I have design masterclasses. I have different courses for providers to create a healing oasis for your patients, as well as patients who are looking to use and employ these healing modalities that I have designed. And you can find them all at claimyourparadise.com. And also, as a gift for your listeners, I have my top 3 healing essentials for your home that you can start living in your paradise today. And that's at claimyourparadise.com/podcast.
Oh, awesome. Thank you so much for that. I'll make sure all those links are in the show notes. And yeah, I think that wraps everything up. I apologize for I was closing too soon here. So many goodies at the end. All right, everyone, we'll see you next time.
Thank you so much for listening to the Quantum Healthy podcast. We hope you found some value in this information. And if you feel inspired, please share it and leave us a 5-star review. This will help us reach so many more people. If you want to connect with Laura, you can find her at laurakissmanwellness.com and Andeea at andeearay.com. Links are below in the show notes. Now, go find some sunlight and embrace your own quantum healthy.